What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 5 Final Look. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over each position and break down a couple of my favorite players for this NFL DFS main slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 5, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So if you're going to pay up at the quarterback position, I'm going to pay up for Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 10th worst defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes has averaged 28.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.5 rush attempts per game. He got 8 rush attempts last game. He scored 20, 43, and 31 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He's going to be about 7% owned here, projected at 28.7 fantasy points here in Week 5. He's $7,700 DraftKings salary and $1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 55.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 11.5. So we got a pretty good matchup, a super high-scoring game here. And even though the Chiefs are favored, they always pass the ball a ton, so I don't think he's in any danger of not passing the ball enough in this one. He's going to have plenty of pass volume, so I like Patrick Mahomes here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, if you're looking to save some salary at the quarterback position, I just can't get off this pick. I just want to bring it up again. I like Teddy Bridgewater from the Carolina Panthers playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the absolute worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Teddy Bridgewater has averaged 19 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3 rush attempts per game. He got 6 rush attempts last game, scored 27 fantasy points. He's going to be about 11% owned here, projected at 19.5 fantasy points here in Week 5. He's $5,900 DraftKings salary and $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53.5 points scored in this game, with the Carolina Panthers trailing by 1. So we have a high-scoring game, a close, competitive game, and the best quarterback matchup on the slate. So I like Teddy Bridgewater here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Now, if you're really looking to save some salary, you want to take a shot on this guy, I don't mind going with Daniel Jones from the New York Giants playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Daniel Jones is only averaging 12.6 fantasy points per game on the season. He is getting 4.5 rush attempts per game, so that's nice to see. He got 6, 5, and 3 rush attempts in the last 3 games, so he could find the end zone on a rush attempt, and he's going to be about 10% owned here, projected at 18.9 fantasy points here in Week 5. He's $5,400 DraftKings salary and $1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Giants trailing by 9. So the reason why this pick makes sense is because it should be a high-scoring game. Dallas, their secondary has been awful. Their defense is no good. They've been giving up huge points to every team they face. So this should be a passing game script. Great matchup, high-scoring game. So I like Daniel Jones here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. This guy is going to be in almost all my lineups. I just have a feeling about this one. I like Ezekiel Elliott from the Dallas Cowboys playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Ezekiel Elliott has averaged 22.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 17.5 rush attempts per game and 7.5 pass targets per game. Now, I like this pick here because he's involved in the passing game, but he only got 12 and 14 rush attempts in the last 2 weeks, so his legs are fresh. I think they're going to be feeding the ball to Ezekiel Elliott all game long. I think he has a monster fantasy game here in week 5. He's going to be about 28% owned, on the field for 89% of the snaps. He touches the ball 35% of that time. He's projected at 21.3 fantasy points here in week 5. He's 7,800 DraftKings salary and 1,200 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 53.5 points scored in this game, with the Dallas Cowboys favored by 9. So I like that the Dallas Cowboys are favored by 9. Maybe they won't have to pass the ball so much in this one. They should beat the Giants by a pretty big margin here, and I think Ezekiel Elliott gets a ton of work in this one. So I like Ezekiel Elliott here versus the New York Giants. The other running back I like is Mike Davis from the Carolina Panthers playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Mike Davis has averaged 15.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.5 rush attempts per game and 5.8 pass targets per game. But those rush attempts per game are a little bit low because of the week that he came in for the injured Christian McCaffrey. But the last 2 weeks, he got 16 and 13 rush attempts and 6 and 9 pass targets. So he's involved in the passing game, and that's what gives him his fantasy value. And he's going to be about 32% owned here, projected at 18.8 fantasy points here in week 5. He's 6,400 DraftKings salary and 400 more on FanDuel. So I like that FanDuel price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53.5 points scored in this game. They have the Carolina Panthers trailing by 1, so you got a good matchup. And also the Atlanta Falcons don't have a very good pass defense, so those pass targets, he should do pretty well with that. So it's a close competitive game. So I like Mike Davis here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, so this next pick, I've been kind of hesitant all week long on this guy, but I think he just makes sense because of his price point, because of the opportunity and the matchup. So I like David Johnson from the Houston Texans playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. David Johnson has averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.8 rush attempts per game and 3.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 27% owned here. He's on the field for 80% of the snaps. He touches the ball 35% of that time, projected at 14.8 fantasy points here in week 5. And he's only 5,200 DraftKings salary, and he's 1,200 more on FanDuel. So I like that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 55 points scored in this game, with the Houston Texans favored by 5.5. So you have a high-scoring game, a home favorite with a great matchup. So I like David Johnson here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL, MLB is still going, NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Oh, quick mention for Kareem Hunt. Even though he's in a bad matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts, Nick Chubb is out, so Kareem Hunt is going to get the bulk of the volume. Well, he's going to get all the rushing volume. He's going to get all the rush attempts. He's going to get the pass targets. He's involved in the passing game. So he's been scoring really well, sharing the ball with Nick Chubb. Now he gets the backfield to himself here in this one. So despite the bad matchup, I like Kareem Hunt here versus the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. If you're going to pay up for a wide receiver, I like Tyreek Hill from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Tyreek Hill has averaged 18.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.3 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 16% owned on the field for 87% of the snaps. He's projected at 18.5 fantasy points here in week 5. He's $6,900 DraftKings salary and $1,300 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 55.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 11.5. If Patrick Mahomes has a big day, no doubt Tyreek Hill will be involved in that. So if you're playing Patrick Mahomes, you could pair him up with Tyreek Hill. And you could also stack in a guy like Sammy Watkins, who's low salary and he's got pretty good pass volume. So I like Tyreek Hill here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, a nice mid-range play for you here is Robbie Anderson from the Carolina Panthers playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the worst defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Robbie Anderson has averaged 19.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.5 pass targets per game. So lots of volume for this guy. He got 11 pass targets last game. He's going to be about 21% owned on the field for 72% of the snaps, touches the ball 18% of that time, projected at 15.3 fantasy points here in week 5. He's $5,900 DraftKings salary and $300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 53.5 points scored in this game, with the Panthers trailing by 1. We got a nice matchup here, so I like Robbie Anderson here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Now, for about the same salary, you can also go with DJ Moore. You know, it's like, who's going to have the better game, Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore? So far, it's been Robbie Anderson, but DJ Moore could get it done for you here this week. So both of those guys are good options. Not sure I would play both of them in the same lineup. I'd pick one or the other. Okay, so I already mentioned Sammy Watkins. He's only $4,500 DraftKings salary, and he's $1,100 more on FanDuel. And he's averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.8 pass targets per game. He's projected at 12.1 fantasy points here in week 5. So I think Sammy Watkins makes sense to pair with a guy like Patrick Mahomes, gives you some salary relief in your lineup. But if you're looking for another low salary wide receiver who's got a great opportunity here, take a look at Golden Tate from the New York Giants playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Golden Tate has averaged 8.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 8% owned here, He's on the field for 73% of the snaps, projected at 11.7 fantasy points here in week 5. Now, he hasn't had a big game yet, but he's only 4,600 DraftKings salary. He's 900 more on FanDuel, and he's playing that weak Dallas Cowboys secondary, the weak Dallas Cowboys defense that's been giving up a ton of points to every team they play. And it should be a passing game script for the New York Giants in a high-scoring game. So I like Golden Tate here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. If you're going to pay up for a tight end here in week 5, I think you just got to go with George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers playing the Miami Dolphins, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends, George Kittle has averaged 26.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10 pass targets per game. And he scored 43 fantasy points off of 15 pass targets last week. He's going to be about 25% owned. He's on the field for 97% of the snaps. That is a lot of snaps at the tight end position. So he's always out there. He's the focal point of this offense here. He's projected at 17 fantasy points here in week 5. He's 6,600 DraftKings salary and 500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 50.5 points scored in this game, with the San Francisco 49ers favored by 9. So you just can't ignore that monster stat line from George Kittle last game after coming back from injury. So you know he's 100%. So I like George Kittle here versus the Miami Dolphins. Okay, now I know we're attacking this Dallas Giants game, but it's for good reason here. So if you're looking for a tight end that's not going to be highly owned, he's got low ownership, but he's getting a ton of pass volume, take a look at Dalton Schultz from the Dallas Cowboys playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing tight ends, Dalton Schultz has averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7 pass targets per game. Now he's only going to be about 3% owned, and he's on the field for 71% of the snaps, projected at 10.5 fantasy points here in week 5. He's 4,800 DraftKings salary and 500 more on FanDuel. So we know it's going to be a high-scoring game with Dallas favored by 9. He should get plenty of pass targets in this one, and I think he just makes sense if you want to find a tight end that's going to make your lineup unique. At only 3% ownership, he got 8, 6, and 10 pass targets in the last 3 games. He's been productive, so I like Dalton Schultz here versus the New York Giants. But my favorite tight end on the slate, one of my favorite players on the slate this week, is Evan Ingram from the New York Giants playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Evan Ingram, he's only averaged 7.5 fantasy points per game on the season, but he's getting 7.5 pass targets per game. He got 10 pass targets last game, and he's going to be about 18% owned. He's on the field for 90% of the snaps, projected at 12 fantasy points here in week 5. He's only 4,600 DraftKings salary and 900 more on FanDuel. So fantastic matchup here. High scoring game, passing game script, a ton of pass volume. I think Evan Ingram has a monster day here in week 5. So I like Evan Ingram here versus the Dallas Cowboys. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.